The USS Sims was the lead ship of her class, named after Admiral William Sims, who pushed for the modernization of the US Navy. She was laid down on the 15th of July in 1937, launched on the 8th of April 1939, and was commissioned on the 1st of August 1939. She was built by the Bath Iron Works Corporation in Bath, Maine. After her commission, Sims conducted shakedown training and set an availability until the 2nd of August 1940, at which point she joined the Atlantic Squadron. She was reassigned to Newport, Rhode Island on the 28th of May 1941 and patrolled the approaches to Iceland in June. With the outbreak of the war on the 7th of December, she was reassigned to Task Force 17 and made for San Diego, California. The USS Sims joined a convoy taking Marines to Samoa and arrived on the 23rd of January 1942. Task Force 17 was supposed to join the attack on Wake Island on the 16th of February, but the sailing orders were changed shortly after departing and Task Force 17 proceeded to Canton Island. The USS Sims operated in the New Caledonia-Tonga area until late April. During the Battle of the Coral Sea, she was ordered to escort the oiler USS Neosho. On the morning of the 7th of May, a Japanese recon plane spotted Sims and Neosho and reported them as a carrier and a cruiser. Admiral Takeo Takagi ordered an all-out attack. After evading dozens of bombs from 2 attack waves, during the 3rd attack wave, Neosho sustained 7 direct hits and Sims was struck by 3 quarter-ton bombs, 2 of which exploded in the engine room. She buckled and sank stern first. Only the chief, R.J. Dickin, and 15 other sailors could be saved by a damaged whaleboat and were rescued on the 11th of May. The USS Sims was struck from the Naval Vessel Registrar on the 24th of June 1942. For the stats, we're going to compare and score the Sims against the Mahan and the Hatsuharu. The Sims has 13,800 hit points, which is only 300 hit points less than the Mahan, and the Hatsuharu comes in at only 12,100 hit points. The Sims definitely is one speedy bastard, with 39 knots top speed, a 500 meter turning circle and a 3.5 second rudder shift time. She absolutely outclasses both the Mahan and the Hatsuharu. The Hatsuharu with its 3.0 second rudder shift time is definitely a bit better at driving S-curves, but the combination of such a high top speed and such a really tight turning circle make the Sims an amazingly mobile ship. The Mahan sadly already suffers the problem of the high-tier American destroyers in that the top speed drops down quite significantly and the turning circles become bigger and bigger. The rudder shift time always kind of stays the same with the American destroyers, but that loss in top speed is a real issue. Detectability wise, at this higher tier there isn't really that much of a difference anymore. The Sims surface detectability is 7.6 kilometers, with the Mahans being 7.9 kilometers and the Hatsuharus being 6.7 kilometers. Now obviously that 900 meter buffer that the Hatsuharu has is great and there is no question about it, it's definitely better than the Sims, but the differences are nowhere near as significant as they are at the lower tiers between US and Japanese destroyers. Now the guns on these ships are actually very interesting. The Sims and the Mahan, of course being American destroyers, kind of focus on their guns a little bit more, and so they both have over 10 kilometers range, they both have great turret traverse times, and they both have a great rate of fire. But ever since patch 0.3.1, Japanese destroyers now do a lot more damage with their HE rounds. And so the Hatsuharu has a top HE damage on its rounds of 2,300, whereas the Sims and the Mahan only have 1,900. But with their increased rate of fire, this still works out to about 500 more DPS, with both the Sims and the Mahan having 1,520 DPS and the Hatsuharu only having 1,027. But it should be said that the guns on the Hatsuharu are really not that bad, and you can get a lot more use out of them than you used to be able to before the patch. Now it also needs to be said that both the Sims and the Mahan had their rate of fire nerfed in 0.3.1. They used to be at 13.3 rounds per minute. This may not seem all that bad, but in the overall scheme of things, this actually cut into their DPS quite harshly. There's also one more problem with the Sims and the Mahan that I will have to highlight in the footage later, and that is that their shell velocity is abysmally bad. To reach the advertised 12.9 and 11.7 kilometer gun ranges, they also have to elevate their guns so incredibly high that they practically become mortars. It's really quite disgusting, and we'll talk about it a bit later, because it is absolutely the biggest detractor in these two ships. Both the Sims and the Mahan have only a 5% chance of setting an enemy ship on fire, whereas the Hatsuharu actually has 10%. One of the new Japanese strengths is that they have better HE ammunition across the board that also causes fire more easily. But then again, the Sims and the Mahan almost fire twice as fast, and so they kind of make up for that in the end. The torpedoes on the Sims are actually a really big problem. Now if you've played your way through the American destroyer line, you're already used to only having 4.5 or 5.5 kilometer range on your torpedoes, but on the Sims it's just a little bit too short ranged. Tier 7 is just in such a bad spot. I mean, you meet Tier 10s pretty regularly at the moment, and having only 5.5 kilometers range on your torpedoes just gets you killed so many times. It's great that they're fast and that you have 2 launchers of 4 each, but that range is really limiting, and these days I get barely any kills with Sims torpedoes. The Hatsuharu, on the other hand, with its 10 kilometers range and way bigger damage, is still a fantastic torpedo boat. And while the Meihan also doesn't have the best range on its torpedoes, 6.4 is at least somehow serviceable. You actually can get some kills sometime. They are definitely not as useless as those on The Sims. And lastly, we have anti-aircraft, and surprisingly, it's not the Americans that win this category, it's the Hatsuharu. On its top hull, the Hatsuharu has 74 anti-aircraft DPS at 3 kilometers range. Believe it or not, this is actually quite significant. In a pinch, you can just follow behind a group of airplanes and shoot a few of them down before disengaging and going somewhere else. It's definitely nice to be able to help your team that way. It's not amazingly significant and you shouldn't build your battle plan around it, but it is definitely worth mentioning. Both the Sims and the Meihan have absolutely terrible anti-aircraft. You're very rarely ever going to get a kill. If you get an aircraft kill with them, it's really just luck. And in most situations, it's just going to be better to deactivate them entirely. Both the Sims and the Meihan are very equal in hit points and beat out the Hatsuharu handsomely, and so they both get a point, whereas the Hatsuharu gets nothing. Speed is the one category where the Sims shows its strengths, beating out its competition handsomely by having a better top speed and a better turning circle and a very competitive rudder shift time. The Japanese destroyers are always the stealthiest destroyers, and the Hatsuharu is no exception, beating out the Sims and the Meihan in both surface detectability and air detectability. But it is worth mentioning that the Sims and the Meihan are much closer behind than the American destroyers were at lower tiers. In guns, the point once again goes to both the Sims and the Meihan because they have the superior range, they have the superior DPS, they have the superior rate of fire, and they have the superior turret traverse time. Their guns just are their bread and butter. But remember that there's a caveat that we'll talk about in the clips in just a moment. For torpedoes, there's no discussion to be had. The Hatsuharu has amazing torpedoes, 10 kilometers range, 62 knot speed, 17,000 damage. She only has 6 torpedoes at a time, but those are so incredibly strong that they just absolutely beat out the Sims and the Meihan. In fact, the torpedoes on the Sims are really weak. So weak that I'm tempted to take a point from the Sims, but I'm gonna refrain from doing it. Now, the category of anti-aircraft is clearly won by the Hatsuharu, with the Sims and the Meihan not even having anti-aircraft worth mentioning. And that brings us to a final score of 3 for the Sims, 2 for the Meihan, and 3 for the Hatsuharu. Now let's look at some more noteworthy stuff in the clips. So there are 3 distinct issues I would like to highlight with The Sims, and I guess we'll just start with the good, and that is the amazing mobility. I mean, just look at me dodge all of these shots. I'm getting pummeled by 3 cruisers from 2 sides, and I'm easily capable of just dodging all the shots. All of them are within 10 kilometers of me, and they have no chance whatsoever of ever hitting me if I don't want them to. And that's definitely the main strength of The Sims. I mean, don't get me wrong, all destroyers are very mobile and capable of dodging shots, but The Sims is just in a class of its own. So incredibly good. Like, only after about 15 seconds do I finally take a shot in the butt here. Now I have to talk about the negative, and it's, of course, the torpedoes. Look at this right here. I'm firing a huge salvo of torpedoes at a Benson, a destroyer. He takes 2 of my torpedoes and survives. That is ridiculous. And it is a big problem in this ship. Now, this last one is my biggest bugbear with The Sims, and I must admit it's not entirely objective. Some of it has to do with how I like to play my destroyers, which is firing at really long range and engaging enemies as soon as possible. And the problem is, of course, the ridiculous shell travel time. Look at this, 12.72 seconds for the shell to reach maximum distance. I mean, seriously, the shell trajectory is so high that it leaves the top of the screen and then appears a few moments later. It's like I fired a flare at the enemy. It's ridiculous. And it's something that you have to deal with in a lot of American destroyers, but in The Sims and the Meihan, it's especially backbreaking. And at the end here, I'll add a few screenshots just to compare it to the Cleveland's shell travel time at 12.8 kilometers and the Gremiyashi's shell travel time at 11.8 kilometers. The difference is huge, and it really does impact the Sims playstyle quite a bit. And here we are with the best game I've played in The Sims. You've actually already seen the beginning of this game because it was what I used for the history lesson as background footage. I turned off the UI, drove around, fired my guns a few times, and then I turned back my UI, and this is the game that followed. I'm already opening up my mortars on this poor Kagero who beached himself, but yeah, at 12-second shell travel time, firing flares at him, it's never gonna hit, so yeah. But this looks like a much better target. That Fuso, 11 kilometers away. Surely I can't miss him. Yep, getting one more salvo in. Those should be pretty much on target. Yep, they're good. Of course, a Fuso doesn't really have to worry too much about a Destroyer firing at him, so he's not gonna do a lot of dodging. He's just gonna take those shots and move on with his life. I mean, what's 2,000 or 3,000 hit points to a battleship, right? But there's the Kagero again, and I so want to kill this guy because he dares to have a tier 9 Destroyer, and I so desperately want to get to tier 9 or tier 10 before the OBT. But alas, it was not to be. I should not be getting this kill. Nope. He drives away into the sunset, like a bastard, leaving me at 0 kills. Not so fond of this Baltimore firing at me, so it's time to go behind the island, lay down a smoke screen. That smoke screen can also help my battleship buddy and the cruiser that is behind me. And I want to get around the island, want to get my eyes on the Baltimore again for when the Fubuki either dies or goes behind the island and just can't see him anymore. And whoop, there's the enemy Sims. Detected me as well. He opens up, but his aim is not so well. His second salvo looks much better though, and he hits me for like 3,000 hit points, but my salvo in return takes out his gun and his engine. There goes his repair kit, I would say. I get some more hits on him, and this is actually a perfect example of what happens in The Sims if you don't actively dodge. Like, if you looked at me, I constantly drive left and right. I dodge the entire time. The thing is, the turret traverse on The Sims is so incredibly fast that you can just dodge at all times and you can still easily fire at opponents. And you should really do that because the speed on The Sims is pretty much the only thing that you have on every other ship in the game. And so you totally should be just driving those S-curves like a bastard. Try to get some more shots on him, but he's too stealthy. And oh yeah, by the way, look at this amazing turning circle. In this little tight pass between those two islands, I can easily make a turn. Not a problem. A lot of other ships would have had to go through those two islands, turned beyond them, and then come back. Wasting just a lot of time. But the Sims, not an issue. Again, he still drives in a very straight line while I dodge, and so I get a hit on him, resetting the cap, but he does not get any hits on me. Seriously, this is definitely a good game to show off, because that dodging makes up for a lot of problems on The Sims. The crappy torpedoes, the really long shell travel time, you can make up for it with the speed. And you definitely should. Right, luckily my battleship friend, or was it the cruiser? It could have been the cruiser, got one hit on The Sims, resetting the cap fully. And I tried to fire some torpedoes, but the Sims, it turns out, has turned around and is making his way for the other side of the island. But not with me, sonny boy. I'm going to have you. Yes. Here, take these lovely shots. And oh, they're a little bit too far to his rear, but I do set him on fire. Hopefully his repair kit is still on cooldown. Give him another salvo. That looks a lot better. He gets a hit or two on me, but I'm not too worried. Also, there were torpedoes behind me, which means the Kagero is around again. Oh, that looks good. Good, another good salvo. One more should take him out. Yep, that looks pretty much on target. And there he goes. And I still have over 10,000 hit points, having killed an entire Sims on my own. Oh, yep, there was the Kagero, just taken out by our cruiser. Very good. However, our team did terribly, and now it's 3-6. Ugh. And our battleship, the Colorado, is on the other side of the map. This is a really bad situation. The Colorado is facing down 2 enemies, and there's just no way I can get to him in time before either he dies or takes out those other 2 ships by himself. He actually takes out one of the other ships, so maybe he has a chance. And oh, there's the Baltimore that I was looking for. Perfect. I'm just gonna fire 2 salvos of torpedoes if my other stupid launcher can come around. Thank you. There we go. Hoping that at least one of those stupid torpedoes hits. And I'll just turn around and engage him from the other side. Yep, 1 hit. Of course, Sims torpedoes, so it did like 5,600 damage. Pfft, so ridiculous. Tier 7 and it does damage like a freaking Tier 2 destroyer. The torpedoes are so bad on this ship. Anyway, since he's focused on my cruiser buddy, it's definitely time for me to let my gun speak. I'm still going to be dodging a lot to try and avoid fire from his secondaries, but there's not that much you can do about it. So you try your best, but make sure you definitely use your rate of fire as much as you can against cruisers like this, especially if they're tier 9 cruisers like the Baltimore. Very, very scary stuff. But I mean, I'm doing some good damage to him, and you know, every little bit counts. He has now taken out the cruiser on my team, so he's going to be turning his guns toward me. 14 seconds for my torpedoes, that is not good. I switched to AP in the hopes of getting some penetrations, and I actually do. God! Oh, that's actually pretty well dodged. Took out one of my guns, and here are my torpedoes. First salvo, yeah, looks... Oh, he's turning toward me, perfect. Make it smaller, make the spread smaller. Give him a nice one right in front of his bow. Yep, those look good. Those look as good as they can get. Now I just have to hope that he doesn't see it coming and turns into them. Because if he does, then never gonna happen. Never gonna get a hit. Oh, I got a hit. Nice. Very good. That was from the first spread. So the second spread is still... Yes, there he is. Dead. Nice. Took out the Baltimore. Now it's 2-3. Because the Colorado actually took out both of those guys by himself. Like a boss. But here's the Mogami, and he fires really well-aimed salvos and does take me out, sadly. Oh well. I did what I could. But the points are looking really in our favor now, so if they can't take out the Colorado fast enough, then we might actually have a win on our hands, crazily enough. Let's look at the stats. And we actually did end up winning this game, making it a 3,000 experience game, the highest score I've actually ever gotten in The Sims, and the most credits also I've ever earned in The Sims. Did about 17,000 damage with HE, 9,000 with AP, another 18,000 with torpedoes. Really not a bad result for The Sims. There is nary a ship in the game that infuriates me as much as The Sims does. I really like destroyers. Okay, destroyers are definitely my favorite playstyle in Warships, and I have really gotten used to the bad torpedoes on US destroyers, but they are just so terrible on The Sims. Like, I mean, seriously, they are the worst torpedoes in the game. I am just going to say it. The Sims has the worst torpedoes tier for tier in the game. Because whereas 4.5 and 5.5 kilometer range does totally work at lower tiers where the maps are smaller and everyone has worse range and worse accuracy and is just generally crap at the game, at this higher tier it just is a death sentence in most cases. And even when you get a bunch of hits on enemy ships, you do like 5,000 to 8,000 damage, tops. It's ridiculous. It's so bad that you cannot even kill destroyers with 2 torpedoes. And the freaking shell travel time on The Sims. Just kill me now, please. It's so completely counterintuitive to my playstyle. Because this is why I love the Gremiashi so much, engaging enemy ships at ranges that are completely atypical for destroyers, and being accurate and, you know, the shells getting there in a reasonable time frame is awesome. It makes the Gremiashi so much fun. You can play it as both a gunboat and a more traditional torpedo boat destroyer. But The Sims is so locked into its role as a gunboat because of how terrible its torpedoes are, that this shell travel time problem just is a million times magnified. And I personally absolutely hate this ship. I hate it so goddamn much. I played a total of 26 games in The Sims, and that is the most games I played in any of my destroyers. And for those 26 games, I would have much rather played any other destroyer in the game, even the Clemson or the Mutsuki. It's still a good destroyer, and if you're looking for a premium ship for your Americans, you could definitely do worse than The Sims. And by the way, I resent Wargaming for nerfing the rate of fire, not just on this, but all of the American high-tier destroyers. And if they're going to do something like this, then they better damn well write it into their fucking patch notes. In conclusion, I can only say that finishing this review makes me very happy, because it means I never have to play The Sims again. If you enjoyed this review, please consider liking and subscribing, and if you have any feedback, leave it in the comments. If you have any replays for World of Warships or World of Tanks that you would like me to commentate, send them to cloakingdonkey@hotmail.com. And this concludes my series of reviews for the closed beta testing phase premium ships. I will probably take a little break with these reviews, not because I'm sick of them or anything like that, just because I expect at the end of closed beta testing there will be a big patch that is probably going to change a lot about the balance again, and so any reviews I make now on any of the non-premium ships is just going to be obsolete by the time open beta rolls around. And so I'm just going to wait until then. But as soon as open beta rolls around, I'm going to be right back on that train, start reviewing again, and my first order of business will be to complete the Japanese cruiser line, starting from the Furutaka going all the way to the Zao. But until then, I've been Eldritch Master Donkey, and I'll see you in another video.